In this presentation, we're going to go through the basic steps for creating a block. I have two objects drawn on my screen with just line entities. The lower one is drawn with all entities in layer 0. The upper one is drawn in a layer called red shapes. The first step to creating a block is to go up to Draw pull-down menu. About halfway down the pull-down menu, you'll see where it says Block, and then Make Block. That brings up the block definition dialog box. The first step in the dialog box is type in a name. Make sure that your name is descriptive so that you can identify what the block is by name. I'm going to call this one Xbox. Then we have a base point. The base point is going to be the same thing as the insertion point. You can either specify it on the screen, pick points, or you can enter coordinates. I'm going to pick point. With pick point, you go out to the main drawing where your entity is shown, and you want to select a pick point or an insertion point on that object. Think about the handle or where you want the handle on your object. In this case, I'm going to make it on the lower left-hand side. After you identified a base point, the next thing is to select objects. So I go to the Select Objects icon, and I select all the objects I want included with that block. After selecting all the objects, it says 6 are found. I hit Enter. It goes back to my block definition dialog box. Then I have three choices: retain, convert to block, or delete. Retain will retain the original objects exactly as they were before I've selected them or converted them to a block. It will retain the original entities. Convert to block will convert those entities into a block and leave that block on the screen. And the last one, delete, will delete the objects from the screen. In all three cases, a block is created and placed in memory. It's only the original entities that we're talking about, whether we want to retain them, convert them to a block, or delete them from the screen. And then last thing, we have annotative, scale uniformly, and allow exploding. Typically, you always want to allow exploding. At this point, we'll not address annotative or scale uniformly. I would leave those unchecked and only select allow exploding at this time. In the area of settings, block units should always be in inches at this point. And if you want to give your block a description, that's where you can type a description. It's not necessary, but if you want the description to show up in the Design Center upon insertion, that's where you would give it a description. So you could just type in, box with an X in it. So whatever you want your description to be, that's where you would type it in there. And finally, I'm going to say OK. Notice that the block or the object that I have on the screen is all one entity. Instead of being 6 separate entities, now it's all one entity. You notice that it only has one grip on it, and I can use that grip to relocate it. I'll type 2 enter, and I can move that object by that handle. So instead of having all separate entities with separate endpoints and grip points, I have one entity with one grip point, which is located at the base point or insertion point of the object. I'm going to create another block just to go through the same steps again. This time I'm going to go from the Draw toolbar where it says Make Block. Brings up the same dialog box. I'm going to say Red Xbox. Then I'm going to pick the center point of that box for the base point. I'm going to select objects. So I select all the objects I want to be created with that block. And this time I want to retain the original entities. Everything else looks good. I click OK. Now my original entities are 6 separate entities, but yet it did create a block and place that block into the memory of this drawing. Those are the basic steps for creating a block. Please let me know if you have any questions.